Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I'll never forget the day the bully chased me home from school, all the way home. Not to my block, not to my street, not to my driveway, to my front door. And that was his biggest mistake. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Stay tuned.
Master the story power method to captivate your audience, improve workplace culture, and 10x your fundraising.
Scan the QR code to book your first coaching call or visit storypowercoach.com.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at storypoweracademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. When that bully chased me home from school that day, he learned a lesson that it's hard learned, but it's valuable to witness, not just in the lesson itself, but in the way that it came about. See, what he learned is that good families run deep. It was unfortunate for him that the week that he decided to pull this stunt of chasing me all the way to my front door, my mom was at work, but my granny was home. My granny she was that kind of people. My granny grew up in the grit of the late 1930s and early 40s. She grew up in the grit of living in a family of 15 with not enough food, not enough to go by, not enough to live on. But she found this way to survive, and she was a straight-up mean streak survivor. Her ability to get through the tough times gave her this coarse fighter spirit. Oh, she was a Sunday school teacher, and she always had her wig just so, and she always had the right words to say, and she was pretty well educated considering when and where she grew up. But she also had this way about her that said, if you cross the line, all of a sudden you're going to find yourself staring down the barrel of Mama Bear mode, and Granny don't play that. And at some point, Mama Bear mode and Granny don't play that collide with your own worldview and your own well-being. And that's what Bruce Crawford found that day. He was threatening to beat me up for no other reason than he didn't like my shoes. And he met Granny, who said, not on my watch. It's a pretty powerful thing. But see, something else that I learned from Granny over a period of time was there's a right way to talk to people and a wrong way to talk to people. And there's a proper relationship that you should have with the ones around you, with your elders and with your siblings and with your neighbors and with your creator. And when you get those out of whack, you get a whack. I can remember her telling me, go out there to that fig tree and bring me back a switch because you need one. Well, first couple of times I thought I'd be funny and I brought her something so big you could barely swing it. She did. The next time I thought, well, I'll be more judicious. I'll bring back something smaller and, barely enough. But she used it. And eventually she got my attention. But I can tell you when Granny Bear mode and a sense of justice come together, the way you view the world changes. It did for me. It did for my bully. In fact, I don't think I ever saw that kid again. I don't think I ever even saw him at school. He just kind of vanished into the woodwork after he was put in his place. Now, you would have a hard time with that today, because I don't know if you've noticed, but our culture has shifted. Our core values are eroded, if not gone. Our justice system is flipped on its head. Maybe you've heard the story about the little boy who was playing with his sister in the yard, and this crazed maniac who had multiple arrests for sexual abuse of a child. Yeah, I just said it out loud. Drug the little girl into the woods behind the house to do what he was prone to do. And her brother stepped up with a slingshot and left a nice knot in the middle of his forehead. Justice isn't pursuing the abuser. It's pursuing the teen boy who protected his sister. not on my watch. Granny Bear mode's about to get activated. There's something wrong with this system. See, here's the biggest challenge, though. I just this morning, a reel popped up in my Facebook, and I'm sure it has to do with the algorithm of the things that I tolerate in my Facebook. But it popped up and it showed two girls walking down the sidewalk. A guy randomly walks up, punches one of them, pretty much knocks her out cold. The other one jumps on him. He's like, leave my friend alone. Now, you can't hear any dialogue, but his friends jump in and try to push him back as well. He fights his friends off and goes after the two women again. One man against two women, he's punching them. Every swing is knocking them completely off their feet, bouncing them off the walls and the windows. One jumps on his back to defend her friend who's on the ground, and he's trying to go after her again. And he just bounces her off the wall and throws her around again. His friends begin to gather around. Here's what's really sad, though. Someone's filming the whole thing and doing nothing. 20 or 30 people walk by as if, ooh, that's a bad thing. I shouldn't get involved. He might punch me too. Try that in a small town. I don't think our values are as far corrupted as they are in some of these big towns. And this may have been an international city, a place where, the criminal's always right and there's no such thing as justice unless it's to protect you from telling on the criminal. Yes, there are cases right now in multiple countries where the person who reported the crime against them is being squelched by the justice system. Let me call it what it is, the injustice system. They're being told, you cannot report this to the public. We got this. We got it under control. You cannot act out. You cannot get revenge. You cannot get even. You cannot get your stuff back, your dignity back, or your life back. Can you tell it sticks in my craw just a little bit? I remember the Justice League, truth, justice, and the American way. I think all of those are at risk right now. I really do. Now, here's what I know to be true. When I grew up, and when my parents grew up, and when my grandparents grew up, this concept of what is truth, justice, and the American way, just for a ballpark of things that are important. In that day, we learned that sometimes from a fig tree switch. Sometimes, don't make this mistake, the weeping willow, those things are long and whippy and they will wrap all the way around you. Don't ever fetch a switch from a weeping willow tree. But back in the day, we learned these values, these truths, these absolutes, if you will, from our family, our parents and grandparents. And I realize many of us came from broken homes, and many of us suffered what then was normal discipline, now is considered abuse and will get you thrown in jail. I get that. I understand sometimes those measures of justice need to change. They need to be revisited. But I can also tell you that we're facing a day today where young people have very little discipline. They have no boundaries. They realize they can push the envelope as far as they want to. In fact, most of them aren't pushing the envelope. They're going, what envelope? Think outside the box. What box? And until they end up with a lifetime of incarceration or life-altering injuries, the ones that are paralyzed from the neck down because they got shot breaking into somebody else's house in the middle of the night. The guy who is now suing the homeowner because he decided to break into her house through the mail slot. And she met him before he got in the door because she had no idea what kind of danger she would be in if he got in the house. So she met him in the mail slot with a baseball bat. I say, good on her. I say, stay out of other people's houses if you're not invited. I say, don't be taking people's stuff for whatever reason. I have a friend that I went to high school with who did 5 years for stealing a head of lettuce. Yes, a head of lettuce. When I asked him, what were you doing? What were you thinking? He said, I was just hanging out with a bunch of friends. We were drunk, about 19, 20 years old. They were drunk. They were goofing off. They decided to break into this person's house. He said, I didn't really want to steal anything. I didn't want to go to jail. I said, well, how did you end up with a head of lettuce? He said, I was hungry. I had a head of lettuce and a bottle of dressing. I was going to go home and make a salad. I said, so you broke into somebody else's house to steal a 99-cent head of lettuce and a bottle of dressing? He said, no, I went there because all my friends went there. Bing, 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 bing. He never set out to spend 5 years in jail. He never set out to steal a head of lettuce. He just got caught up with a bunch of people he shouldn't have had any business hanging out with. And you know why? Because he didn't listen to his parents. Because the peer pressure around him didn't include a solid family background where parents would say, don't do stupid stuff like that. Stop hanging out with people like that. You're better than that. You have a better opportunity in life. Go get it. See, the solution to the problem we face right now, these roving gangs of teenagers on the streets with no discipline, and the law can't do anything about it. When the police are outnumbered by them 35-1, it's a little hard to enforce the law. It's even harder to enforce the law when you arrest them. And I watch a lot of these cop videos. I see it from two sides. I see a lot of these cops that they're putting their foot down over the stupidest things. They're pulling people over for stuff that I'm like, really? You got nothing better to do? Go grab a donut and let it go. Window tinting, license plates, lights. Are you kidding? But when they pull them over, they then have this confrontation with them that tends to escalate and then escalate and then escalate a little further. And as it continues to escalate, what they find is, we've got them in jail. For what? Well, resisting arrest. Why did they resist arrest? Because you pulled them over for no reason? That's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is, and I learned this when I went through Code Blue training and Fort Worth Citizens Police Academy training. Often if there's one infraction of the law in someone's behavior, they tend to have that attitude towards a lot of things. A car that's at a register for a long period of time, no inspection sticker used to be the thing back in the day, a busted headlight, you're just driving it around that way. Well, maybe you're unaware of it, and a pullover and a warning, it will get it fixed. And maybe it's because you got something else to hide and you really just don't care about the law. Maybe you got a weapon you're not supposed to have, or other things in your car, contraband you're not supposed to be driving around with. But see, all of these things go back to the same thing. Who's been speaking into their life about right and wrong? Who's been sharing with them what values are, what moral character is, what personal development is? I can tell you, as much as I grew up in a house of discipline, as much as I grew up with a pretty strong sense of justice and right or wrong, I've seen even my sense of justice questioned. In my young years, 12, 13 years old, I remember watching a guy chop a friend's front tire in half with an axe. And we just stood there in disbelief, like, who damages somebody else's stuff like that? But we also realized he was the guy with the axe. What are we going to do about it? There was nothing we could do to react. Until that same guy met my granny on the front porch. He didn't have his axe then, but she had a frying pan. I'll let you speculate from there. But see, even as I grew up, I was never taught about personal development. I was never taught about setting goals and moving forward to things. My football coaches were about the greatest advice in my life, besides my immediate family. But I don't know if you know this or not. There are movements afoot today to basically disband the family. We don't need that. This father figure, mother figure, those are antiquated. Those are outdated. What foreign ideas? Why? Well, because the school system, they can raise your kids better. Show me some evidence that that's true. I mean, my mother was a teacher. My wife is a substitute teacher. I mentored in public high schools for a decade. Show me some evidence that the mentorship, the apprenticeship, the character development, not just pass the test, but the who that they become. Show me some evidence that the public school system, the government schools, have done a great job at that over the last 5 generations. I think you'd be hard pressed. Now, granted, there are some kids with great moral character, with great fortitude, with great inspiration, who come through the government education system and come out on the other side unscathed. And there are some who go in with a pretty good sense of self and home and right and wrong and family values, and they come out of the pipeline to prison. I know I'm stepping on some toes today. I hope you put on your steel-toed boots, but this is a big deal. And I find that when we take the language, the apprenticeship, the conversations away from the dinner table, around the fireplace, playing board games, and we shift it into the social media, the mass media, and the government school system, our culture begins to find this not even homogenized way of looking at life, but this everybody is the same even when they're not. Everybody is equal even when they're not. What do I mean by that? One of the things that I remember growing up with was the principle that you better contribute. I was 14, 15 years old the first time I picked up a hay bale and tried to throw it on the back of a trailer. I wasn't big enough then to pick up a hay bale and throw it on the back of the trailer. So the guys that I hung out with said, fine, get in the driver's seat, drive slow, follow the path. You throw one of us off the trailer, we're all going to jump you. They trusted me to get in the cab of that truck and pull that trailer. Not because I was the best one out there for it, but because I couldn't keep up with everything else. A year and a half later, I was big enough to throw hay bales. I was throwing them on the trailer. We were stacking them in the barn. We were doing that work. How much did it pay? 25 cents a bale. And where did that money go? Electric bill. 25 cents a bale in the sun, sweating my butt off outside of Central Texas, and the money went to pay the electric bill. Why? Because if you're a part of it, you contribute to it. It's called being a productive member of society. It's called being responsible for your own world around you. That's a foreign concept these days. The idea that if you have a lot, you should give it to those who don't have a lot. And those who don't have a lot, well, they're just receivers. There's another set of words for that, the oppressed and the oppressor. The oppressed are those who have a lot, from everyone according to his ability to everyone according to their need. Yeah, there's other words for that. And those other words, those other concepts, the means of production, for an example, they're being swayed, they're being manipulated, they're being deceitfully, in my opinion, deeply deceitfully brought into the minds of young people who hear the rhetoric. They hear the quotes and the quotable quotes, and they can speak them back to you. They have no idea what they mean. They can't pronounce 6-syllable words, half of them. High school graduates, college students. They can repeat Che Guevara. They have no idea who he was. Before his face was slapped on t-shirts, what did he do? Where was he from? What kind of values does he have? Does he believe what you believe? Does he live the kind of life that you would look at and go, I want to live that kind of life? See, there's a core underlying theme behind all of these ideas. It's called a narrative. The narrative is the story. He who has the best story wins, always. And the best story isn't always the truthful story. I hate that that's true, but it is. Now, ultimately speaking, at the cosmic level, at the humans versus anything other than human level, at the God level, in my opinion, God's story always wins. 6 words, I was blind, now I see. That story never fails. I was like this, and now I'm like this, and there's nobody to blame but him. There's nobody who could have done it but him. That's a pretty deep core narrative. But see, there's some other core narratives like the truth, justice, and the American way. I put my hand on the Bible to say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, not portions of it, not the part that's convenient, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Those foundational applications of who we are as American people, those things used to be so deeply ingrained because they were apprenticed by our parents. Justice was expected. Doing the right thing was expected and punished when it wasn't. We've lost that sense of responsibility and accountability. We've lost that sense. And part of the reason we've lost that sense is because other narratives have come in to undermine it. The hardest thing to fight is the soft tyranny of low expectations. Lowering the common denominator. Bringing in an education system that seems like you're getting a lot of information, but you're not really learning anything. Changing the narrative about basic definitions. What is the meaning of is? What is a man? What is a woman? What is a father? What is a mother? What is a birthing person? What is a birthing person? These are narratives. These are conversations. And I'm not asking that you agree with me on what my definitions are. I mean, we have a lot of books for that. we have a lot of reason for the reason those definitions came along. There's a lot of meaning behind those words. And if you take the time to get to know them and be able to pronounce them, you might understand why those words are foundational, which is another reason that books are being eaten up by AI machines so that they can alter the meaning. I haven't seen it yet. I have somewhere in my library Up From Slavery. I understand that the dust jacket on that book has been altered. It no longer says Up From Slavery, an autobiography. It now says Up From Slavery, a historical fiction. That's a problem, my friend. That's a problem. It's also a narrative. It's a micro narrative, but it's a narrative that says, yeah, this is kind of like mythology. What we thought was the true story of the Roman Empire, it's just mythology. What we thought was the true story of the worlds that have gone before us, it was just mythology. This idea of slavery and who owned the most slaves and who was the largest slave owner in Tennessee when de Tocqueville came to the United States. You should look that up. Go read Democracy by de Tocqueville, and it's going to shock you who the slave owners were. I really think it will. But if you don't know your history, you're destined to repeat it. It's another narrative. See, there's some little narrative tools that I have here. Here's one called counterculture. I'll come over here to this camera so they're a little closer. Counterculture. Some of the things that we should be talking about. Where do you stand on these issues? Here's a little one, just another little handbook. This one's called The Founder's Wisdom. A little out of focus. The Founder's Wisdom. These are just tiny little things you can put in your pocket. Here's one called The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. And this little one, Primer, American Liberty. These are tiny, tiny, tiny little books. I literally carry copies of these in my backpack and sometimes in my briefcase. I'd venture to guess that less than 5% of American government school systems teach the truth about what's in these things. Here's another book. Maybe you've seen this one, 12 Rules for Life, Jordan Peterson. When he wrote this book, there was an unbelievable division around the world, even here in America. Because in the book, he espouses a narrative that not everybody is willing to accept. He gives some instructions, these 12 things that if you do these, the quality of your life will be better. Let's see if the outline, by the way, the subtitle of the book is The Antidote to Chaos. 12 rules. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Make friends with people who want the best for you. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to someone else is today. Don't let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. That rule number 6, I remember people saying, why are you telling me to make my bed? They said, well, if you can't take care of your own room, if you can't take care of the space around you, what makes you think you need to be criticizing the rest of the world and the way they live? Fair point. There are a lot of people who want to tell everybody else how to live, and their life is an absolute train wreck. Pursue what is meaningful, not as what expedient. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Assume the person you're listening to might know something you don't know. Be precise in your speech. Don't bother children when they're skateboarding. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. Those are pretty good rules for life. Each of them has a deeper meaning. But see, just those rules cause the fur on some people's back to stand up. The furries were all up in arms over some of these ideas because, oh my gosh, they're old-fashioned. They're truth, justice, and American ways kind of ideas. How dare you? In fact, it was about the same time that this book came out that the Smithsonian said the word work ethic was white supremacy. What? I know many of people of various colors and denominations and nationalities and origins who will tell you the reason I am where I am today because I didn't quit, I didn't give up, and I worked hard. Now, working hard isn't the only answer, but it's a really solid foundation. But to say that's a work of white supremacy, that's a narrative that has no benefit to anyone. It serves no one except an agenda that says we're all equal even when we're not, which is a fallacy. Some people need more help than others. Some people are capable of helping more than others. And if they have a sense of justice, they will help. They will get involved. They will do. They will step in when one bully is beating up two women on the side of the street. It's the suppression of right and wrong that tries to make everyone equal, even when they're not. That's a challenge. Now, see, my challenge is I feel like if we could just get back to some of these narratives, speaking the truth to power, Tiananmen Square style. But there's nothing harder to fight than the tyranny, the soft tyranny of low expectations. They don't show up with a baseball bat. They don't come to your door with an axe. They don't come to your door and ask you, are you willing to give up everything? No, they just come day by day, and like little mice, they nibble away at everything, every right, every freedom, every opportunity, until your liberty is completely gone. One narrative at a time, they convince even your children to turn against you. One narrative at a time, they lie about everything you've ever believed. One narrative at a time, through mass distribution, through media, through television, through the altering of books that we've had on our shelves for 25 years. And if we're gonna resist this soft tyranny of low expectations, we're gonna do it the same way, one narrative at a time. And I believe more every day that that's my purpose on this earth, to train people to identify the narratives that are not serving them well, to equip them with the ability to craft narratives that successfully transform the world around them, and then teach them how to bring those into culture in ways that don't cost a whole lot of money. They don't cost a whole lot of lives, but they sure have the power to change the culture we live in. John Maxwell, in his book, Change Your World, page 47, he says, invite others to join the cause. When you become a catalyst for change, one of the most significant things you can do is invite others to join in the cause. As soon as another person works with you and is influenced by what you're doing, you're a leader whose why is bigger than you. Martin Luther King Jr. said about the importance of leaders when it comes to change, may I stress the need for courageous, intelligent, dedicated leadership. Leaders of sound integrity. Leaders not in love with publicity, but in love with justice. Leaders not in love with the money, but in love with humanity. Leaders who can subject their particular egos to the greatness of the cause. Martin Luther King Jr. I acknowledge that what I've been called to, my purpose, what I've done with leading leaders for the last 11 years, over 1,800 episodes. My job has been to influence the narrative about leadership, especially for those who are young, aspiring leaders who never had leadership growing up like I didn't. But today, I feel like that calling is accelerating. I feel like the world around us is changing even faster. Every day, we have to go one step deeper into our own grit, our own fortitude, our own confidence, and be willing to stand our ground, because the ground beneath us is shaking and it's being pulled out from under our feet like a rug. I'm looking for a bunch of people who want to gather together and go, here's my core values, here's the narrative, here's the story that I know enforces this truth, not just as an idea, but as a reality I've lived through. And I want to be empowered and equipped. I want to know how to go out there and shape these narratives. If that's you, go to storypoweracademy.com and choose the cohort that suits you. Is it being business-minded? Is it entrepreneurship? Is it American liberty and freedom? Is it kingdom-oriented? There's two of them. There's going to be two different cohorts. One that's business-focused on entrepreneurialism, and one that's specifically focused on kingdom. Very similar strategies, very different intentions. I challenge you to take a look at those and get involved where you can. Time to be silent is over. Our Tiananmen Square moment is here. It doesn't look like it did in Germany. It doesn't look like it did in World War I or II, but World War III is here. It's here. And how we fight it is going to be with the words of our mouth, the stories that overcome. I need you to join me in this cause. I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, for Tell It Like It Is TV and Story Power Academy. Have a blessed day.
Think storytelling's just for bedtime? Nah, it's the secret sauce for business magic. Stuck in a rut with bland pitches and yawning clients? Enter Boost Your Business with Story Power. 6 weeks of epic storytelling training. It's like leveling up in a video game but for your career. Master the art of narrative and watch connections blossom like a viral TikTok. Simple, impactful, and game-changing. Ready to transform your biz vibes? Dive in now and make storytelling your superpower.
If you've ever been in that moment where you hear someone telling something to someone you care about, a spouse, a student, a coworker, your own kids, yourself, and as you're hearing what they're saying, you're thinking, well, it sounds so intelligent. They express it so well, but it just doesn't ring as true. It seems like I've heard something different than that before, and I'm just not buying into it. But I don't know what to do about it. There's a new event coming up called Kingdom Cohort. This is an online course. It's virtual. You can attend the entire thing and never come to the studio if that's what you want to do. It's 18 weeks of 30-minute courses that you can study on your own at your own pace. There's some homework assignments to help you get the best out of that 30 minutes. And then there's a 2-hour call for each of those courses. 6 calls for each course, total of 18. And over the next 18 weeks, you can walk through this entire program to help you identify lies, tell better stories, and understand how these stories work together to build brand and culture through your leadership skills, using the stories of the things you've already lived through. If that sounds fascinating to you, click that QR code and get involved as quickly as you can.
Master the Story Power method to captivate your audience, improve workplace culture, and 10x your fundraising.
Scan the QR code to book your first coaching call or visit storypowercoach.com.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.